right, I'm Callie Feyen, one of the members at First Presbyterian Church, and we're gonna walk through the Stations of the Cross using Lectio Divina, and I'm gonna start with a little story. So, I grew up Presbyterian, but when you live just a hair outside of Chicago city limits, where St. Patrick's Day is as big of a deal as Christmas, where church bells mix with the sounds of the L trains, you are very much aware of the Irish Catholics. I knew all about Tuesday night CCD classes, and that if you completed all of them, you got to wear a white dress with tulle, and I think even a veil. I begged my parents to let me take this class. And then in high school, I took note of the Saturday early evening mass services and told my mom and dad that it would be kind of nice to take care of church on Saturday so I could go out later those nights and sleep in on Sundays. In the summertime, if the windows were open, I could often hear the organist practicing at Ascension, the church behind our house. Lots of times I'd walk over and the doors of the church would be open, and I'd step inside and sit and listen. Sometimes I'd unfold the part of the pew that allowed congregants a place to kneel when it was time to pray. Once I went into a confessional, and it is exactly how it is in the movies. Dark and scary, and the organ music swelled my insides, and I wanted to say something important, something worthy of forgiveness and grace, but I had no idea what to say. I had no idea what I was doing there, but I wanted to stay. I loved all the symbolism. The Catholic Church spoke metaphor fluently, and for someone who is highly sensitive, I clung to the objects and rituals that stood for what was beyond me, and yet encompassed me still. So when Jesse got accepted to the University of Notre Dame, it was a bit like Disney World for me. There was Touchdown Jesus, for one thing. You couldn't go to a football game and not see him standing tall and proclaiming, "It is good." But there was also the sculpture of Mary and Elizabeth right outside the bookstore, wrapped up in one another, so you couldn't tell which mother is which, and you can't tell if this eternal hug is for the joy or the terror for the boys in their wombs leaping toward one another. If I could, I would tell 23-year-old Callie studying those two women with a knot in her stomach that it's both, that mothers cling to each other because they are both joyful and terrified of all their children leap toward. On the south side of the campus, under a clock that hangs on O'Shaughnessy Hall and beneath trees whose leaves drip with color in the fall, is a sculpture of Jesus and the woman at the well. The sculpture, Jesus and the Samaritan woman at Jacob's well, is a mixture of bronze and metal and about 8 feet tall. Benches surround one side of the piece, creating a nook on campus. If you were to sit on the benches beneath the clock and the trees, you wouldn't see the quad without seeing these two in characters. The green lawn and the zigzagging sidewalks fit almost perfectly in the space between their profiles. The place where Jesus and the woman both lean on a well named after Jacob, the man who wrestled with God, is part of the campus that was designed for students to gather and relax. Beneath the trees whose benches can hold remnants of lake effect snow until they snap, the quad seems to rest on this well's horizon. There's the grotto, where candles are forever glowing to stand for the prayers that burn within us and that cannot be snuffed out. And then there are the Stations of the Cross. My memory of finding them is this. I was in the first years of my teaching, and the weather was hinting at spring, and we're in the Midwest. So you know a hint of spring does not mean in any way that more and larger hints are coming. It means that in this particular moment, it is sunny and warm enough that you can smell the dirt under the snow, that today the liner beneath your winter jacket can be unzipped and tossed aside, that right now is the time to go for a walk, because that hint is hope for what you cannot see. So that's what I did. Back then, my routine was to head to the campus bookstore and over a mocha, grade papers and prep lessons. But that day, I decided to go for a walk around campus. I found the stations in a patch of woods just west of the St. Joseph Lake. That I found them in the woods, that I was in the woods at all, made me question whether this is a true memory or something I dreamed. I'm not the kind of person who goes into the woods. I don't even really like backyards. And so surely these stations were images I'd conjured up. Close to 20 preludes to spring have gone by since I've lived in South Bend. My greatest strength and my greatest weakness as a writer and a person is my ability to make meaning out of something that is not there. And so I contacted my good friend Diane, who works on the campus, and asked her, "Are they really there? Are they really in the woods?" "They are," she told me. "I'll send pictures." And so I can now relish in what it is I know and not write an apologetic for what I think I remember. I know what I saw slowed my pace because it was unexpected. I know where I stood was dark and quiet, and I know I had to look closely. I had to be willing to look closely, to understand what it was I was looking at. I know what I had no knowledge of the stations until that moment, but I understood with the same fear and swelling as I felt when I sat in the confessional while the organ music played that this was the story of Holy Week. I did not know what to do. I did not know what I was doing there, but I knew I wanted to stay. In her introduction to the Soul's Journey, Catherine Burleson explains that she'd been a distant observer to the stations and didn't involve herself with the drama of the story because she wasn't sure what role to play. And not knowing my place, she writes, I stayed firmly rooted in myself. I know this well. It is probably my default to stay rooted in myself and my own experience, because I don't know where it is I fit in, or worse, if I fit in. Story is what brings me out of my roots. It is what connects me to other people, lots of times to people I'm not sure I want to connect to. But that is the point. We need stories to uproot us. We need them to take us into the woods and see where it is we might plant ourselves and grow. We need stories to help us find our way out of the woods, forever changed, forever willing to grow again. So we're going to work today a little bit with metaphor, because in her introduction she says that finding the metaphor of the story is one way to connect to these stations. So there are the plaques of the images that Catherine created, and along underneath them are each of the stories, the Bible stories that they came from. I thought we would first practice the Lectio Divina using the word witness. So I'm going to show you we're just going to use one word, and I'm hoping that as we study this, you'll find an image that might anchor us or you in your reflection. So this is from Luke 23:7-31, and here is the image. You see the cross, and then there are women facing the cross. One thing that Catherine does in this book throughout is focus on light, even in the darkness. And so I don't know if you have the book or not, but she has all 14 underneath each page of the little devotion reflection. And you can see her working with light throughout. So this is from Luke 23:27-31. A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" I learned how to do Lectio Divina through a podcast called Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. I don't know if you are familiar with that or not. I love Harry Potter. And what they do is they study a chapter, they discuss a chapter, and usually they'll just take one line, which is incredible to me, and they ask 4 questions. And then at the end of the podcast, they pray for one of the characters, and somehow their specific stories gets at a universal truth of our own. It's a great podcast, and they're about 25-30 minutes long. But here are the questions that they ask. So I'm going to ask the question, and I will read the section again, and you can write a response. You do not need to share this. It's just a practice. It's a way to prayerfully consider text. So the first question is, what is going on narratively? So what is the story in this section? A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" So maybe a sentence or two on what it is that's happening. What is the plot? The next question is, what is going on allegorically? In elementary and middle school, we call this text to text, or text to self, or text to the world. What other stories might this call to mind? And it could be things that are going on in the news. It could be things that you remember in other stories, maybe in the Old Testament. So I will read it again, and you can ask yourself, what is going on in this text allegorically? A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" So what stories come to mind? The third question is, what does this text say about the world or people? What does this tell you about the world and people, I guess is the question. And I'll read it one more time. And the fourth question is, what is this text calling me to do? A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" So what is this text calling me to do? What I want you to do now is think of some sort of image that comes with witness. When you think of witness, and it can have something to do with the story, but look over your responses and see if there's something that is an image that you could cling to when you think of the word witness. Next, I want you to think of the 5 senses that surround the word witness and your image. This is going to sort of be the anchoring image when you start to write a poem. So what does this image look like? That's the first thing. What do you see when you think of this image? Could be a couple of things too. What does witness look like? And then what does it feel like? If you were to touch witness, what would it feel like? What does it smell like? Does witness have a taste? Can you hear witness? Also, I should say, my creative, skill is writing, but if those of you prefer to sketch, you can certainly do that if you want to sketch. As the weeks progress, I'll bring in art supplies too, but those of you who like to sketch, that's fine too. All right, I would like us to try a poem called an as-in poem. And I learned this form of poetry through Kwame Alexander's book, The Crossover. And what he does is he takes a definition, that's the title of the poem, and then the subtitle of the poem is, the title of the poem is the word, the subtitle of the poem is the definition, and then the first line is as in. And then he takes something specific about the story or his life that illuminates that word, the definition of that word. So this is what I came up with. I chose the word witness because that is a tough word for me to accept and to also do. I don't consider myself somebody who is a witnesser. And I specifically chose this on a night when I was feeling rather grumpy. So I wanted to see what I could wrestle with when I wasn't particularly in the mood to write and witness. So, witness is a noun. As a noun is evidence or proof, and as a verb it is give or serve as testimony. As in, I'm not sure I'm a woman going against the crowd. I'm not sure where I'm going. I fold shirts for teenage daughters that are smaller than what they wore when they were toddlers. I drive to soccer practice while we sing Taylor Swift songs. She tells me they're reading Romeo and Juliet, and her teacher has been gone. Silence. And then I ask her what she thinks of the play. Reading is so much better when you're into the story. I watch her sister slice through the water, and when it's time to dance, she tells me it's okay to drop her off at the corner where there's a puddle of slush. I will practice leaping, she says, and she does. But not before she pushes up her glasses and says, Mama, when do you think I'll have to choose? On Friday night, Jessie is gone. Our dishwasher is broken. My writing is failing. I'm behind, rushed, annoyed, angry. I'm not trying to witness. But at dusk, the sun is a dragon fighting death with her fire. She shows the world what is within her, and I text my friend and say, look, look, you have to look. My anchoring image was the sunset that I saw, and so I tried to see what it was I could do with that, but I didn't want to land it in this, everything's going to be okay because the sun is setting. I didn't want it to be, in my writing circles, we call it tying it with a Jesus bow. We didn't want to do that. We want it to be sort of, you're still on that quest. You're still on that journey. So that's what I tried to do with that poem. So as a warm-up, I wonder if you could try to do a witness poem again. You won't have to share, but the definition, I'll say it again, and you can look over your your notes here for an anchoring image. Witness is noun as evidence or proof, and as a verb, it is to give or serve as testimony. And your first line would be as in. You can think of the story that we read, or you can think of your own life as well. I'll give you a few minutes to come up with something. I'm sorry to stop you. I know that, at least for me, writing is really hard, and once I get into it, I don't want to stop. I would like you to try your hand at another station. They are all around here, and then there's also plaques, sculptures on the wall on the other side, along with over on this table, the 14 stations with the word, the definition of the word, and then the Bible passage from where the soul's journey uses them. If you want to try a word and try another as in poem, or if you want to draw something or just study each of these stations, the following weeks I'll do a few at a time, but I thought in the beginning we would try for just an overview of them so you had a chance to walk around the room and look at each station. If you are interested in revising, one tip that I do, this was a free verse type of poem, and a lot of times it's difficult to say where is this poem going to end, what lines should break, what words should end. I tend to do two things. The first thing I do is I wonder what my anchoring image is. Do I have a solid image that the reader might be able to hold on to and see and feel? So I take note of the words that I'm using in my poem. That's the first thing I do. The second thing I do is I look at the end words. A professor once told me that the end words should make up a mini poem. And so you probably don't want to use words, I hate to use rules, but words like the or a, you want as specific words as you can, and see if you can make that a mini poem. So my words, they're not fantastic, but I noticed that my end words are in, sure, going, crowd, sure, going, shirts, daughters, smaller, war, toddlers, practice, sing, songs, me, Juliet, gone, then, play, better, story, watch, through, water, dance, okay, corner, slush, says, does, glasses, says, choose. Night, gone, broken, failing, behind, rushed, annoyed, angry, witness. Dusk, dragon, fire, world, her, friend, look, look. So if you can kind of try to manipulate your end words to make some sort of a flow as well, where the reader is being taken somewhere. It's kind of like a puzzle, kind of like a Rubik's Cube, if that's something that's not so frustrating for you to think about. I believe this class ends at 11:50, so that's not a whole lot of time, but if you would like to get up and walk around and choose a word maybe for this week that you can study and reflect on and write poetry on. I have a copy of the book if you want to take a look at it, and then there's also copies in the cardboard box if you want to feel the book as well, but they're also all right up here too. So. All right, go ahead and take a few minutes to walk around and see what you can come up with. Looks like we have just a couple more minutes, so if you want to make your way back, I will be here for a few minutes just cleaning up and all that, but if you have any questions, also, if you do want to share at any time during the week, you can email me, and I'd love to read what you came up with. But this week, consider writing an as-is poem, as-in poem for each of the stations if you feel led to. I did notice that on the other side of the room, the stations are just a little bit different than one of the stations over here. The story is the same, but I like the interpretation of the titles and of the images. So, well, thank you for coming out, and thank you for humoring me with your writing. If you want to share, let me know. I'd love to read what you came up with. And next week we'll be doing a little drawing, so get ready for that too. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you.